When Jasmine Crockett calls out Pam Bondi in her recent November live stream once again, you think you know where it's going. But what she reveals next leaves the GOP scrambling behind closed doors and exposes a secret the Attorney General desperately doesn't want you to know. Before we break down how Jasmine Crockett used a casual live stream to completely dismantle Pam Bondi's credibility and reveal the chaos inside the Justice Department, make sure you smash that subscribe button, because this story involves sealed files, incompetent leadership, and the moment when mockery became the most effective form of oversight. The live stream started like most of Crockett's do, casual, conversational, the Congresswoman sitting in what looked like her home office, talking directly to her followers like she's catching up with friends, rather than conducting official political commentary. She'd been doing these streams more frequently. Usually they covered legislative updates, constituent concerns, maybe some commentary on the week's political news, but nobody expected this one to become the political bombshell it turned into. Y'all, I need to talk about something that's been bothering me. Crockett started, adjusting her camera slightly and settling into her chair with the kind of relaxed posture that suggested she was about to say exactly what was on her mind, without filter. I need to talk about Pam Bondi, because the more I watch what's happening at the Justice Department, the more I realize we have a serious problem. And I'm not talking about policy disagreements or political differences. I'm talking about actual competence, or the complete lack thereof. She paused, as if collecting her thoughts, but there was something in her expression that suggested she knew exactly what she was about to say and had been waiting for the right moment to say it. So let me tell you what's been happening behind the scenes with the Epstein files situation, because the public version and the reality are two very different things. Publicly, DOJ keeps saying they're reviewing materials, they're following proper procedures, they're being thorough and careful. But what's actually happening? Chaos. Complete organizational chaos, and Pam Bondi is right at the center of it. The comment section of the stream immediately exploded with reactions, but Crockett was just getting started. Here's what I know from conversations with people who work at DOJ, and before anyone asks, no, I'm not revealing sources because these folks would lose their jobs for talking honestly about what's going on. But they're telling me that there's no coherent strategy for handling the Epstein files. Different departments are being told different things. Timelines keep changing. People who should have access to certain materials don't have access. People who shouldn't have access somehow do. It's a mess. And when career prosecutors try to raise concerns about the disorganization, they're being told to essentially shut up and wait for direction from leadership. She leaned closer to the camera, her voice taking on a more pointed tone. Now, you might think, okay, maybe it's just the normal chaos of a new administration getting its bearings. But here's the thing. Pam Bondi isn't new to government. She was Florida's Attorney General for 8 years. She supposedly knows how to run a law enforcement operation. So why is DOJ under her leadership looking like a clown show when it comes to one of the most sensitive investigations they're handling? Crockett pulled up something on her phone, reading from what appeared to be notes. Let me give you a specific example. 3 weeks ago, there was supposed to be a classified briefing for relevant congressional oversight committees about the status of the Epstein files review. Standard procedure, DJ briefs Congress. We ask questions. Everyone's on the same page about what's happening and why. The briefing got canceled at the last minute. No explanation, just scheduling conflict. We'll reschedule. 2 weeks later, they try again. Canceled again. Now we're on week 3. And guess what? Still no briefing. Still no explanation. Still no transparency about what they're actually doing with these files. She set her phone down and looked directly into the camera. And when members of Congress, including me, try to get answers about why we're being stonewalled, you know what we're told? The Attorney General is personally overseeing the review and will provide updates when appropriate. That's it. That's the whole answer. Pam Bondi is personally overseeing it, so just trust her and wait. Well, I don't trust Pam Bondi, and after what I've learned about how she's handling this, neither should you. The stream's viewership was climbing rapidly now, people sharing the link across social media as word spread that Crockett was going in on the Attorney General. Comments were flying by too fast to read, a mix of supportive reactions and angry conservative pushback. But Crockett seemed completely focused on what she was saying. barely glancing at the chat. "Let me tell you why I don't trust her," Crockett continued, and now her tone had shifted from conversational to prosecutorial. Pam Bondi has a history, a documented history of making decisions based on political convenience rather than legal merit. Remember when she was Florida AG and her office was investigating Trump University for fraud? Remember how that investigation just went away after Trump's foundation made a donation to her political committee? She claimed it was all proper, claimed there was no quid pro quo, but the pattern was pretty clear. Money flowed one direction. Investigation went away. She held up a hand, anticipating the objection. "Now, I know what some people are going to say. That was investigated, nothing was proven. Stop bringing up old news. But here's why it matters. It shows a pattern of behavior where Bondi's decisions align suspiciously well with what's politically beneficial for her and her allies. And now she's in charge of handling files that potentially implicate powerful people, including people in the administration she works for. You see why that might be a problem?" Crockett pulled up another document on her phone. "Here's what else I've learned. There are career prosecutors at DOJ who've been working on Epstein-related matters for years. People who know the cases inside and out, who've built expertise and relationships with victims, advocates, and investigators. Several of them have been reassigned, moved to different divisions, given different cases, basically sidelined. And who's making those personnel decisions? Pam Bondi's office. Who's being brought in to replace them? Political appointees with limited prosecution experience, but strong loyalty to the administration." She looked up from her phone, her expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Do you see what's happening here? They're systematically removing the people who actually know what they're doing and replacing them with loyalists. That's not how you run a legitimate investigation. That's how you run a cover-up." The comment section was now completely divided, with supporters praising Crockett for speaking truth to power and critics accusing her of conspiracy theories and political attacks. But something interesting was happening on political Twitter simultaneously. Several journalists were starting to make calls, trying to verify what Crockett was saying. Within 30 minutes of her making these allegations, news outlets would start confirming that yes, there had been unusual personnel moves at DOJ, and yes, the promised congressional briefings had been repeatedly delayed without clear explanation. Crockett wasn't finished. "You want to know the really crazy part? I've had Republicans reach out to me privately, expressing concern about how Bondi is handling this. They're not going to say it publicly because they can't cross the administration, but behind closed doors, they're worried. They're worried that the disorganization and the secrecy are going to blow up in everyone's faces. They're worried that when information finally does come out, it's going to be in the worst possible way because nobody's been managing the process properly." She shook her head, a gesture of genuine frustration. "And look, I get it. Handling sensitive law enforcement materials is complicated. There are legitimate reasons for confidentiality, for careful review processes, for not rushing things. I'm not arguing that DOJ should just dump everything into the public domain tomorrow. But what I am saying is that there's a difference between careful and deliberate, and chaotic and political. What's happening right now is the latter. And Pam Bondi is either incompetent and can't manage the process, or she's deliberately creating chaos to buy time and protect certain people. Either way, it's a massive problem." Crockett took a sip of water, letting her words sink in, before continuing with what would become the most widely quoted part of the entire stream. "Here's my message to the Attorney General, and I'm saying this publicly because she's certainly not taking my calls. Pam, if y'all were doing your jobs properly, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If you were running a transparent professional review process, if you were briefing Congress like you're supposed to, if you were letting career prosecutors do their work without political interference, none of this would be an issue, but you're not doing any of that. You're creating obstacles. You're stonewalling oversight. You're making personnel decisions that look corrupt, and you're hoping that nobody notices or cares." She leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting to something almost amused. "But here's the thing, Pam. People do notice. People do care. And every time you cancel a briefing, every time you reassign a career prosecutor, every time you refuse to answer basic questions about what's happening with these files, you're making it more obvious that you have something to hide. You're not protecting the integrity of an investigation. You're protecting people who don't want that investigation to go where the evidence leads." The live stream continued for another 20 minutes, with Crockett taking questions from commenters and expanding on her concerns about DOJ's handling of various matters. But the damage to Bondi's credibility had been done. Within hours, Bondi incompetence was trending. News outlets were running stories about the delayed congressional briefings and the personnel changes Crockett had mentioned. And multiple Democratic members of Congress were releasing statements demanding that the Attorney General provide immediate clarity about the Epstein files review process. The White House response came through a press aide who dismissed Crockett's allegations as political theater from a partisan member who's more interested in headlines than facts. But notably, the statement didn't actually address any of the specific claims Crockett had made. It didn't explain why briefings had been canceled. It didn't address the personnel changes. It was classic deflection. Attack the messenger, ignore the message. Pam Bondi herself stayed silent for 2 days. When she finally addressed the controversy during a routine press availability about an unrelated matter, her response was terse and defensive. "I'm not going to respond to every baseless allegation from members of Congress who clearly have political motivations," she said when a reporter asked about Crockett's stream. "The Justice Department is conducting its work professionally and appropriately. We'll provide information to Congress when it's appropriate to do so." The answer satisfied no one. Even conservative legal analysts who generally supported the administration noted that Bondi's response was inadequate and that the lack of transparency was becoming a problem. Whether or not you agree with Representative Crockett's characterizations, she's raised legitimate questions about process and oversight that deserve substantive answers. One former Republican DOJ official told Fox News, "Dismissing those questions as political theater doesn't make them go away." Behind the scenes, according to multiple sources who spoke to various news outlets, the situation inside DOJ was exactly as chaotic as Crockett had described. One whistleblower told the Washington Post that there's no clear chain of command for the Epstein materials review. Multiple people think they're in charge, and nobody wants to make decisions because they're afraid of political fallout. Another described an environment where career staff are terrified to do their jobs properly because they don't know if doing the right thing legally will get them fired politically. The situation came to a head 2 weeks after Crockett's live stream, when a federal judge, responding to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit from a media coalition, ordered DOJ to explain why certain Epstein-related documents that should have been released under previous court orders remained sealed. In their filing, DOJ claimed they were conducting ongoing review of the materials, but they couldn't provide a timeline for when that review would be completed or what criteria they were using to determine what should remain sealed. The judge was not impressed. In a ruling that legal observers described as unusually sharp, she wrote that the court finds the government's explanations inadequate and its delays unjustified. The lack of coherent process and clear timeline suggests disorganization at best and obstruction at worst. She gave DOJ 30 days to produce a detailed plan for reviewing and releasing appropriate materials, with regular status reports to the court. Jasmine Crockett responded to the judge's ruling with a statement that was equal parts vindication and renewed criticism. "A federal judge just confirmed what I said 2 weeks ago. DOJ's handling of the Epstein files is a mess. Pam Bondi's leadership is failing. And the lack of transparency isn't about protecting investigations or victims. It's about protecting powerful people who don't want certain information to come out." The judge has now forced DOJ to actually do its job. We'll see if they comply or if they find new ways to delay and obstruct. In a follow-up live stream, Crockett went even further. "I want everyone to understand what this judge's ruling means. It means a federal court looked at DOJ's excuses for why they can't release information and said this is nonsense. It means the chaos and incompetence I described wasn't exaggeration, it was reality. And it means that Pam Bondi's claim that everything was being handled professionally was, to put it bluntly, a lie." She continued, her tone becoming more serious. "But here's what really concerns me. If they're this disorganized and defensive about the Epstein files, what else are they screwing up? What other investigations are being mishandled or buried? What other instances of corruption or abuse are being protected by incompetence masquerading as process? Because I guarantee you, the Epstein situation isn't unique. It's just the one that's gotten enough public attention that they can't completely hide the dysfunction. The political fallout extended beyond just the Epstein files issue. Several Republican senators who'd been planning to praise Bondi's performance in her first months as Attorney General quietly shelved those statements. Some GOP members started privately expressing concern that Bondi was becoming a political liability, that her defensive responses and the obvious chaos at DOJ were undermining the administration's claims of competent governance. For Jasmine Crockett, the entire episode became another example of how direct communication and refusing to accept obvious nonsense could force accountability even when traditional oversight mechanisms were being blocked. She'd used a live stream, a medium that political traditionalists often dismissed as unserious, to raise allegations that federal courts subsequently validated. She'd mocked and challenged an attorney general who thought she was untouchable, and that mockery had revealed real incompetence that needed to be addressed. In her most recent public statement on the matter, Crockett offered both a summary and a warning. Pam Bondi wanted everyone to trust her, to believe she was handling sensitive matters professionally, to give her time and space to do her job. But when you actually look at what she's doing, or not doing, the trust is unjustified. The professional handling is non-existent, and the time and space she wants is really just cover for protecting people who should be exposed. That's not leadership. That's not law enforcement. That's corruption wearing the costume of justice. And I'm going to keep calling it out until something changes. If this breakdown of how Jasmine Crockett used a live stream to expose Pam Bondi's incompetence and the chaos inside the Justice Department showed you why direct communication matters in holding power accountable, hit that like button and subscribe for more analysis of the moments when mockery becomes a tool for oversight. Drop a comment telling us whether you think Bondi is incompetent or deliberately covering up. And share this with anyone who understands that sometimes the truth comes out not through official channels, but through representatives willing to say what everyone else is thinking. Your engagement helps us keep shining light on the dysfunction that powerful people want to keep hidden.